We have some people in our community that a lot of times you don't get a chance to tell them thank you because they carry a label that a lot of us don't understand. And when you start talking about political service, you start talking about Frankfurt and some of the things we don't understand, sometimes our elected officials are really not what we consider to be friends of ours. But Tom Burch, would you come up here, please, sir? Representative Burch is a very, very proud military veteran. 30-some years plus in the legislature, and we are glad to know him.
Thank you. I see my friend Frank Weaver back there. You know, I didn't know he was with the Tuskegee group until one day he appeared in Frankfurt. He kept it a secret for 20 years from me. Boy, I was so proud of him. But you know, Frank's a very modest guy, and he kept some of them things to himself. But I'd like to share, I have a few minutes. Sure. Well, since I got the podium, I might as well take advantage of it. But I'd like to share a few things. Georgia Powers and I go back a long time. We were both fairly young at that time, but first time I met her was back in about 1963 or 65, and I had done some work on the firefighters at General Electric, where I worked for 39 years. And the firefighters in Louisville were working 72 hours a week and averaging about $1.26 an hour. And I did a study of it, and I presented it to Georgia. She may not even remember. And she pursued a bill and took them through, and they got the firefighters' collective bargaining rights and different things, but that they now enjoy today. I'd like to tell you something. It's funny how people touch you somewhere in your life. When I was in the military, I was getting ready to get discharged, and I was going to use my GI Bill to take flying lessons, which I'd have probably been killed on the first or second takeoff. But an African-American fellow named Harris, that's when the Navy was still segregated, said, "Tom, why don't you go to college?" Says, "You can make it." He says, "I got 2 years of college, and I'll never be any more than a steward's mate." So I took his advice. I wrote to a couple of universities. I got accepted. And I think that's how I got touched by someone. And then I think about after I was in the military for a while, I was riding a bus up to visit my cousin who was an Ursuline nun up on Lexington Road. And at that time, we were still going through the phases of segregation and desegregation and everything. And there was a little black fellow sitting behind the bus driver. And my mom and my brother and I were on the bus sitting across from him. And some big bruiser from Georgia got on there. Where I come from, the blacks sit in the back of the bus. And he started raising all kinds of sand. Well, we got to 2nd and Oak. I got him by the britches and kicked him off the bus, and I said, "Shut that door, because this guy will kill me if he..." But I startled him in such a way that you know, he didn't respond to it that way. I can remember at General Electric, it was segregated. Those of you who may have worked there back in the early 50s, they had separate restrooms, separate water coolers, and everything else. Some of the best managers I worked for were African Americans at General Electric. And I learned a lot from them. And I continue to learn to this day because I represent the Newburgh area, which I'm very proud to represent. I've had the privilege of representing them for 38 years. I'm the longest serving legislator up there. And if it wasn't for Julian Carroll, I would be the oldest legislator up there. He's got me by 3 or 4 months. But you know, we have to be, we can't shrug anything away where somebody might touch us and might move us ahead. If it hadn't been for Mr. Harris touching me If it hadn't been for that little fellow on the bus, got me over. Maybe I had some prejudice at one time. I sort of like to think, I like to judge a person by their character. And I think I've heard that somewhere before. And but I think back at General Electric, I promoted the first person, African-American person, to be a scheduler. His name was Mike Murphy. And now he works for Craig and Landry, selling cars, making more money than I'll ever make in my life. But he did work for me for several years. And and I think of another little fellow that I had back in the plastics area at one time. He couldn't hardly write his name, and he wanted to be a controlman. And you all have met people that could do mechanical stuff, but probably couldn't write their name or anything like that, you know. Well, I had faith in this guy, and a job opened up, a pretty good job, and he said, "I'd like to get that possible bid on it." So he did, and I said, "Now, George, you know you have to be tested for this." "Tom, I can't pass it." I said, "George, you had to be tested. That's the rules." So he goes over and he takes the test, and he did exactly what I thought he'd do. He failed it miserably. And he kept pestering me week after week after week. And finally, about the third week, I said, "Congratulations, George, you got the job." And boy, it just tickled him to death. But 20 minutes later, here comes the steward charging up to him. He said, "You know he didn't pass that test." I said, "The rules are you take it. It doesn't say you got to pass it. You just take it." But that has been my experience. And today, I want to share this with you. I was at Kroger, and some guy walked up to me and says, "Mr. Burch, I want to thank you for all you've done for the people of Kentucky." I didn't know this guy from bean soup. And he took time to say something. I said, and Georgia can vouch for this here. That's what makes it all worthwhile being there, where you can do something. When somebody remembers that you did something, and I couldn't even remember who this guy does. And I tell you what, Georgia Powers was a mover and a shaker, and still is to this day. She can make a move up in Frankfurt. Charlotte McGill was another one. Fantastic lady. And May Street Kid. I'll tell you a little story about May Street. If you knew her, if she didn't get the votes up on that board, she'd turn around and just point to people, "Get them green lights on." And of course, if you knew May Street, she's about this tall, and she meant every word of it. In fact, she did the Kentucky Housing Corporation legislation. She did the legislation to take lead out of paint. Very powerful and very sincere legislator, African American. Charlotte McGill was another one. Georgia Powers another one. First lady African American ever elected to the Senate. And you all could be proud of her. I know I'm proud of her. And I tell you, I just told her, I said, she looks better now than she did 40 years ago when I first met her. But I want to thank you all for letting me be here today and let me share a few things with you about what it means to let somebody just touch you and make the best of it from that time on. Thank you. Thank you.